Hey everyone, my name's Adam. This show is called Defogging Pokemon Battles. Today we'll be talking about damage calculation. For our purposes, damage is the actual number of hit points that the other Pokemon will lose when you attack. Early on, this can be pretty easy to predict, especially if you know some basic information like your own level, your attack power, the base power of the attack you're using, your type, and your opponent's type. But as things get more complicated and the number of factors increase, it's helpful to know exactly how everything fits together on a technical level. Let's start by looking at the damage calculation equation. This version is pulled straight from Bulbapedia. It's a recreation of the actual equation that's used in the game's code during Pokemon battles. This equation has changed subtly over time, but for the last few generations it's stayed mostly the same. This particular version is from Sun and Moon. This version of the equation is great, but I prefer to think about it like this. Once you get a handle on these three quantities, the whole thing starts to make sense pretty quick. Let's start with what I'm calling level modifier, or LM. I didn't know this until fairly recently, but your Pokemon's level actually has a direct bearing on the amount of damage that your attacks do. And this is independent of the fact that your attack stat goes up each time you level up. Like, the literal number of your level gets plugged into this damage calculation equation. To get your level modifier, you'll just take your Pokemon's level, multiply by 2, then divide by 5, then add 2. In most competitive scenarios, you're going to be dealing with level 100 Pokemon, so in most cases, this number is going to be 42. Not so bad. Now let's talk about base power. When you're checking your Pokemon's stats, or in general looking at information on attacks, this is going to be the number that shows how strong the attack is. Flamethrower is stronger than Ember because its base power is 90 and not 40. Most attacks will just give you a basic number for this, but there are also a bunch that have a funny way of calculating base power. An easy way to tell this is if there are a couple of dashes there instead of a number. In a future video, we'll go through some of these attacks one by one, but for now we'll stick to basic damage calculation. So we've got our level modifier, which is usually 42. We've got our base power, which we can usually tell by checking the description of the attack we're using. Now we'll look at SR, what I'm calling stat ratio. This is where our attack stat and our opponent's defense stat become important. You get this value by dividing your attack or special attack by your opponent's defense or special defense. The stat that you use is determined by the type of attack that you use, physical or special. When you use a physical attack, which is indicated by this symbol, your attack will be used and your opponent's defense will be used. When you use a special attack, which is indicated by this symbol, your special attack will be used and your opponent's special defense will be used. There are some attacks that break this rule, but again, those are exceptions. We'll cover those later. Let's start with a basic example. Let's say I've got a level 100 Pikachu using Surf on a level 100 Snorlax. Since my Pokemon is level 100, my level modifier is going to be 42. Surf in Gen 7 has a base power of 90. Since Surf is a special attack, we're going to use Pikachu's special attack and Snorlax's special defense to get our stat ratio. We'll say Pikachu's special attack is 218, and Snorlax's special defense is 257, and the rest is simple arithmetic. When using the factors we know, this comes out to about 62. So now that we know all the factors involved, anytime we have these Pokemon with these stats in this scenario, this amount of damage should be dealt, right? Wrong. Turns out there's actually a sneaky variable here that we'll call R. Have you ever noticed that you can have the same Pokemon hitting another Pokemon with the same attack, but do slightly different amounts of damage? The easiest scenario to notice this in is one where you're doing the same attack over and over and your opponent keeps recovering back to full health. This is because there's actually a randomized value in the damage calculation equation. It's easiest to think about this as a percentage. Effectively, every time you attack, your attack will hit at anywhere from 85% to 100% strength. Within that range, the percentage that's generated is pretty much totally random. This is kind of a weird feature of the equation to wrap your head around. I think that Game Freak included it just to add an element of unpredictability and realism to the battles. It can be a little frustrating, but it really doesn't affect things too much in the long run. It can be good to know in certain scenarios though, like if someone keeps healing and you're getting very close to finishing their Pokemon off, it can be good to keep attacking because even though no factors have really changed, you might get a higher random number in your attack roll. And that might give you that little bit of damage that's needed to make the difference. Using the highest and lowest value for R will let us determine the highest and lowest amount of damage that our attack might do. Alright, now that we've covered the basic components of the equation, we're going to move on to modifiers. Hit the link in the description to move to part 2.